Good afternoon, directors and management of the Leong and CDL group of companies, distinguished speakers, and colleagues. Thank you for joining us at our 10th Annual Sustainability Forum, organized by the Group Secretariat Services and CDL Sustainability Team. We're pleased today to have expert speakers, Ms. Bong Yap Kim, Senior Technical Director of the Sustainability Reporting Office at the Accounting and Corporate Regulatory Authority, also known as ACRA. Mr. Michael Tang, Head of Listing Policy and Product Admission and Head of the Sustainable Development Office at SGX Regco. Mr. Shai Ganu, Governing Council Member and Chair of ESG Committee at the Singapore Institute of Directors. Ms. Fang Yu Lin, Partner, Sustainability and Climate Change Practice Leader at PwC Singapore, and Ms. Shireen Falk, Partner, ESG at KPMG Singapore, and our moderator, Ms. Esther An, CDL Chief Sustainability Officer, and Mr. Sherman Kwek, CDL Group CEO, who will be giving his closing remarks at the end of the forum. Before we begin the program proper, let's invite our Group CEO, Mr. Sherman Kwek, and all of our panelists up on stage to present the tokens of appreciation, which includes a donation to the Plant a Tree program under the Garden City Fund, and a quick group photo as one of our speakers has to take his leave early. Thank you. So coming up first, Mr. Sherman Kwek will present the token of appreciation to Ms. Bong Yap Kim. Second up, Mr. Michael Tang. Thank you, Michael. Next up, Mr. Shai Ganu. And next up, Ms. Fang Yu Lin. Last but not least, Ms. Shireen Falk. Can I invite all the speakers to go back on stage for a group photo, along with Ms. Joanne Yeoh from CSS. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please now take your seats. We will now start with an opening presentation by Ms. Esther An to set the scene for the forum. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this annual forum, and this is our 10th round, and we really started when the world was not talking about sustainability or ESG. So today we want to zoom into probably the hottest topic of sustainability, which is about reporting, and you have been hearing a lot of ISSB, IFRS, TCFD, GRI, you name it, we have it. Today we have our expert experts here from the regulators and also from the consultants. We all have help and hope as well. So CDL has actually 16 years of reporting, and now when we look back, and we really feel that never regret, although it's quite a painful journey, 16 published sustainability reports, and you can see that actually 2023 set all the wrong record, the hottest, on record, and also we have the almost most severe drought and also wildfires, and the lowest in terms of glacier ice, the ice sheet in the polar region. And actually, from a business perspective, we all know that ESG risks are actually investment risks as well, and also business risks. And actually, it is estimated that by Oxford Economics that global warming is going to take away almost up to 20% of global GDP if no action is taken. And if any assets that will not be accepted by insurance agency, it will become stranded assets. So there are a lot of real business and financial threats if no action is taken. And you can see that this two-color column is actually World Economic Forum's the annual risk survey. This is the 2-year projection. All those green bars are climate-related or nature-related. And of course, currently, cost of living crisis is the top, but you can see the green bars are actually getting higher and higher. For 10-year projection, the top 4 out of 10 annual survey risks are actually about failures to mitigate climate change or failures to adapt to climate change threats and biodiversity loss and all that. So today we have a really, really wonderful lineup of speakers are going to cover different part of the risks as well. And I think most important thing is race to zero is, I'm sure you all heard about it. Global race to zero is very important, and more than 160 over countries have already pledged for net zero, and organizations, cities, and financial all together who pledge for net zero account for more than 90% of global GDP. And of course, closer at home, Singapore has also pledged for net zero by 2050, and the financial sector are the key drivers. 2019, we already witnessed the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance, and this one actually have all the biggest institutional investors. As listed company, we need them to make the investment decisions to favor companies who have strong ESG commitment. Insurance Alliance Net Zero also formed in July 2021, just before Glasgow. And then during Glasgow COP21, Net Zero Banking Alliance and GFANS were formed. All these are covering the largest bank in the world. No businesses can thrive without the support of bankers, insurance company, and of course, investors. And this one, I think all of you are very familiar with this, the 5 pillars of the Singapore Green Plan 2030. And of course, it affects any group companies here, whether you are in the finance sector, real estate, hospitality, and industry, all will be affected. So for CDL, we are looking at, of course, sustainable living. Energy reset is very important. And now Green Mark standards have already raised the bar that go without certification level and gold level. We go straight into gold plus and platinum, plus super low energy. So low carbon towards net zero is the priority for everyone. And come next year, carbon tax is going to be 5 times more than today, and 2 years later, 9 times more, and all the way to $80. So we are even having, a long conversation talking about, internal carbon pricing. Yeah, so we are going to share more when we have more to share. Then net zero is really the priority for the building sector. And for CDL, we are very honored to be the first company in Southeast Asia to have pledged for net zero. And when you say pledge for net zero by 2050, you can't tell people that I'll tell you whether I can achieve it by 2050. Everyone is watching. Your investor expect you to do so, and the regulator, and everyone is actually watching whether you have interim target, whether you're on track or not on track. That is what sustainability reporting is all about. You can't manage without measured. So investor wants it, financier want it, your banker, insurance company, everybody want your the data. So for CDL, we have actually, in a very transparent and way to disclose. We have two phases. By 2030, operationally net zero, and cover all the new development as well as 12 buildings that are under our direct control. We are all learning by doing. It's very, very challenging to even make one building net zero. And afterwards, you will see the Green Gallery, which is a small building, is net zero, and because we have very good yield from the solar panel and very low consumption. So that is a possibility. But if you are talking about major building, multi-story building, it's very challenging. So we hope that by 2030, we learn the rope how to do it, and we apply technology and all, and we can actually work hard for the next 20 years and cover the whole global portfolio, spreading 28 countries and regions. A tall order, but I think we have to do it. Yeah. Okay, this is actually the 16 years of reporting journey that CDL has gone through, and you can see my white hair wrinkles are actually thanks to these 16 reports also. So we started with very, very, a simple CSR report in 2008. Not externally assured, we didn't send to GRI. That was actually the first sustainability report using GRI in Singapore by a Singapore company. But from 2009 onwards, we have actually raised the bar and we adopted the GRI standard, also sent to them for endorsement, and also engaged external assurers to do that. And since then, no turning back. Every year we move the bar, and until 2015, it is actually quite important because we captured the materiality finding. Materiality study is very important. Any company who wants to start sustainability reporting, I would advise you to study, get materiality study, engaging your internal and external stakeholders to tell you to rank the top ESG issues. Then you can really zoom into your pain points and improve and close the gaps, okay? Then, of course, 2015, we actually adopted the integrated reporting approach. That is to make ESG part of your business, part of your operation, using the financial lens and business lens to look at ESG. ESG have always been considered as, or named as non-financial for almost 10 years or more. But since 2015, ESG are considered as integrated into the mainstream business, but the movement was still slow. The progress was not as fast as we want it to be. But 2017, we actually moved forward to without printing any hard copy, just do digital. And I still remember that year, there are calls and asking, where is your sustainability report? How come I don't receive it? That was a really very encouraging feedback. It's wow, there are people who read it. Because before that, when we sent to IR or CFO for roadshow and all that, they always send back the whole deck of reports back to me. And in 2018, you can see that we actually highlight on the importance of science-based target, because you can't just pledge for net zero without the backing of science-based targets and real numbers, testing supported by scientists to tell you that whether your data are really validated and whether your targets are ambitious enough. So it took us 8 months to to get the scientists to endorse on our reduction targets. And at that time, it was aligned with 2 degrees. Last year, 2021, we have raised the bar to align with 1.5 degrees, and a lot of data. We can share more on the side. And then from then on, 2019, we zoom into climate. You can see that all our title are about climate. And 2021, we pledged for net zero. And you can see that the latest 2 reports are all talking about zero. Is our favorite number, or a number that gets us really stay awake at night. So I think this year, 2023, we actually adopted the so-called 2 pillars approach ahead of the global launch of ISSB, and also ahead of the collaboration between GRI and ISSB that is coming our way in November. On 20th November, there will be a meeting between the 2 top leaders of GRI and ISSB in Singapore here, and launching a sustainability innovation labs that will guide company how we can merge the 2, because as business we can't just look at financial impact. We also have to look at at our impact on the environment and on people. And for CDL, we have been embracing, the 4I approach. Some of you have already heard of our ESG pillars, that the 4 I's are integration. ESG will not succeed or be effective without integrating into vertically from your board to all the way to operations, and horizontally cutting across all operation and business unit, and the larger circle of ecosystem of stakeholders. The second I is innovation. No building will suddenly become net zero without innovation, without technology. So that has always been CDL's priority for the last few years already. And investment, put money where your mouth is. You have to invest in technologies that can help, decarbonize and also create the ROI that we want. The last I is impact. Whatever we do, there is positive or negative impact. And you have to track, you have to report, because investors want it, regulators want it, and bankers want it when they make the decision. This is the 2 pillars approach. You can see the bottom of it. Some of you are familiar with it. We started with actually UNGC, the 10 principles, then elaborated to, nowadays we call it the Sustainable Development Goal, SDG, 17 goals, 169 targets. And from 2008 onwards, we actually adopted GRI, and also we embraced GRESB, which is the Global Real Estate Sustainable Benchmark, and 2018 Science-Based Target, CDP. And on the value side, now most of these few benchmarks are subsumed under ISSB, which my friends and regulators here on the panel are going to go deep into the details. And on the value side, we talk about CDP, which is climate disclosure, and water and disclosure as well. Integrated approach, TCFD, which is the most important, benchmark, and is actually Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosure. Anything to do with climate, there is a financial impact. And then SASB, which is actually the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. And a lot of American Wall Street boys, all the investor bankers are fully behind it. It focuses on investors' value. And CDSB is now subsumed under the, CDP and ISSB. So we have a lot of acronym. I'm so sorry that, we are really still trying to survive and stay afloat in this so-called alphabet soup. And so this has been the 2 pillars that we've been committed to over the past many years of reporting. We talk about financial materiality. We also talk about the impact materiality. And today, under ISSB, they require more connection between impact and also, financial data. And we will, share more what is required from the financial side. And this is actually the latest 3 years materiality study, just to show you that the world is changing. The focus of ESG issues is also evolving. And from actually 2014, 2015, the top priority ESG issue was actually like corporate governance, legal compliance, and all. Interestingly, 2017, the top one was innovation. So in fact, we respond very, very fast and expand on our innovation with, I think, under Chairman and Yes leadership, we have the Enterprise Innovation Committee, and also now we have the Green Building Decarbonization and Safety Committee, all join force to look at innovation and technology that can move the needles. So of course, innovation applies to improve energy efficiency and also adopt renewable. And what we want is climate resilience and also economic resilience as well. And this is actually in part of our sustainability report. It's all online. We look at how we can, look at the top material issues and link it to what are the risks and opportunities, and what are the actions that we should take. And what you would report is, what are the actions taken, what are the impact? Are we on track to help us decarbonize? Are we on track to do, more? And if we can't, if we fall behind, you have to report it also, because sustainability report is not a PR report. You have to report the good and also the area for improvement. And this is also part of our reports, that we give traffic lights to the key goals and targets. Every year we have interim targets, work towards the 2030 targets. You can't just say that 2030 I'll tell you, now I don't tell you, right? So every year we must report. And if it is falling behind, you will see amber light. Yeah, if you see red light, you won't see me here already. Yeah. So, and we can't do it alone. We have to engage our stakeholders, multi-stakeholder, from the day that you acquire the land, from design with the architect, engineer, consultant, main contractor, subcontractor, and now supply chain is very important because sustainable building materials, in our industry, account for the highest, almost biggest ticket item for under scope 3. Okay, so there are a lot of stakeholders that we need to engage and educate as well. So last but not least, you have to be very clear, very specific, and to identify what is your scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 target, and also stand for science-based targets because investors are more convinced and will find your process and your targets more credible. Because if not, they will feel that is it your lucky number, 60% or 50%? You have to have your reduction backed by science. And of course, we also report it every year, not just about the climate data, but also related to business and financial data. For example, the saving of about 3 to 4 million a year in terms of utility bill, and how we engage, achieve, maintain 100% green lease, and all these. We basically, sustainability, ESG integration is to help us to maintain environmental sustainability, financial sustainability, and also social sustainability. And SDG is something that we believe in. And this is actually our annual report card. You can see that this is 14 leading ESG ratings and rankings. And it is getting more and more challenging. When we first started, we were very lonely, so it's not difficult to achieve top ranking. But now, the whole world is moving forward. And the exam, we have bell curve. Now we are also having bell curve. So even you are doing very well for the past 2-3 years, doesn't mean that you maintain it, means you can maintain the top position. You have to improve continuously and raise the bar. And we are very happy that with all these like MSCI AAA rating for 12 years now, and all these are really seriously taken by our bankers when we work on sustainable finance and all. And okay, this one I'm not going into details of it. I have all my expert speakers to talk about what is ISSB, what SRAC, which I think is something that maybe is a little bit new to most of you. It is actually Sustainability Reporting Advisory Committee. And it is actually spearheaded by ACRA, SGX, MAS, Temasek, and we have 15 members. All are from private sector, the Big Four consultants. We have BlackRock, we have DBS, we have also academia, and also internal audit and accountants professionals. All come together. We formed the committee in June last year. Within 1 year, July, we rolled out the recommendations, which my colleague here, Yap Kim from ACRA, is going to deep dive into it. And now, of course, in the world, there are more and more, 4-letter word, they call it, we jokingly calling it, is from AFRA, the European side. We have the European Sustainability Reporting Standards also. So we really have a lot of acronyms to look at, and we need to build awareness, we need to build capacity within your organization, and also to know how to prepare yourself for better reporting. And this is IFRS, which is the ISSB, behind it. And GRI is going to also, collaborate with ISSB to look at impact. And I know the time is running out now, and I will leave it to ACRA colleague Yap Kim to talk more about the details of our SRAC recommendation. And don't worry, we are building up capacity. Here. And under MTI's leadership, we have Skill Future and also Enterprise Singapore. So we are going to share more. And I have the honor to co-chair with Yap Kim and also ESG. You will be the first ones to know more within the groups that what are the capacity building programs that we are preparing for you. But anyway, sustainability, yes, very groggy, a lot of subjects, but we can work on it and unclutter and move forward and get out of this maze safe and sound. So without further ado, I would like to invite my dear colleague, Yap Kim, to take over. Thanks.
Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm going to actually touch on the global trends and also a bit more about the SRAC recommendations. I hope you have read the consultation paper, but if you don't, I'll do my best. this slide, actually what we are trying to show in this slide is that to emphasize that the train has left the station, but however, different jurisdictions are taking different types of train to the destination. While we all agree on the destination, countries like EU, they are actually taking the bullet train. So in the sense, their requirements actually cover all 3 ESG factors, and also it even extend to something like companies incorporated outside EU. There are actually certain implications. For the rest of the country, they are taking the normal train and etc. And is supported by international corporate reporting standard setting itself. But I wanted to highlight that because in this space, maybe the corporate reporting standard setter are moving a bit slower than the national standard setter. It's inevitable that we have to work with different frameworks in different jurisdictions for a while longer. It does seem to be the matter. Okay? The second one is about regional development. In this case, I think the train is calling for the passengers to board, in a sense that all of us are, in a way, still dealing with listed companies and via listing rules. Most countries, except for Singapore, is consulting on mandatory reporting. The rest are still using listing rules as a means to actually require ESG reporting. But in this case, you will note that certain countries that have implemented the listing rules a bit later, like Thailand and India, or even the Philippines, you started to see framework coming into the picture. Now, the question is when you are trying to mandate reporting through legislations, most of the time, like from using Companies Act and etc., there's a need to kind of balance the requirements and also kind of manage the director's duty itself. So with that, you will realize that more and more countries are starting to look into framework-specific requirements. So in the case of Singapore, we have issued this public consultation in July. The comment period is over by 30th September. Now, in our approach, we are actually trying to take our normal, regularly safe MRT station, which is for the masses, all right? So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to aim for collective action. Collective action in the sense that we are trying to include non-listed company, but we are also very discretionary in the sense that we try to get the large non-listed companies, like in the case of annual revenue for more than $1 billion. The reason is because we believe that such larger companies actually have the power and influence to make the difference and able to kind of push through the climate action that we require. So therefore, we are going to let the listed company lead the way, which is using ISSB standard in 2025. But then for the non-listed company, they will follow suit in 2027. Okay? Now, at the same time, we also noted that not every company is like CDL. They have moved so far in 16 reports. There are some that are really just beginning their journey. And there is a need for us to do capacity building and buy time to do this capacity building. And therefore, we cannot. But then, climate action is urgent, right? It's not like we can wait very long. So therefore, we have decided we act fast by kind of starting small. So if you notice from the way we selected the standards, we have selected ISSB standard, mainly because it covers something more baseline, what we call baseline requirement. And yet, investors are fully supportive of it. At the same time, you also notice that we try to introduce the requirements incrementally. So that means to say, like assurance requirement, it will only come in 2 years later. And on things that are a bit more well-established methodology, like Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission, it does not cover Scope 3 that I think most of you are very concerned about. And then, even though we have chosen ISSB standard, we have also decided, like in the case of Scope 3, we have heard a lot of concern. We are actually going to extend the relief for non-listed a bit longer, 1 year more than a listed company. We hope this will actually allow and ease the transition. So what are the implications to you, depending on your profile here? I understand there are listed company here, and there are also the non-listed company here. So for the listed issuer, you have to be prepared to transit from TCFD to ISSB standards. Now, while ISSB is supposed to cover baseline requirements, they are not basic, okay? They are actually pretty comprehensive, and also does have certain more complex disclosures itself. Like scope 3 emissions, like anticipated financial effect, which could be tricky. Okay, so you do need to prepare. At the same time, by 2025, you are listed issuer, you need to prepare, circulate, and table the sustainability report at AGM together with the financial statements. The reason is because these two reports has to come hand in hand for investors to make decision. Okay, but what is the practice? The practice today is that we tend to issue sustainability report much later than financial statements, right? But we can't delay the financial statements too far off because the investors are all waiting for the results. And therefore, there's a need for you to look into the reporting process for sustainability report and try to align. At the same time, from 2027, there will be the limited assurance requirements. And the limited assurance should be obtained from registered climate auditors, and also using standards that we prescribe, what we allow. The reason is because we need to kind of enhance the integrity and credibility of the report. And then, of course, you need to file the report itself with ACRA for public use, like how you normally do today for financial reporting. For the non-listed company, which are more than $1 billion, you will realize that we allow some exemption. So that means to say, if you are a subsidiary, okay, if you are a subsidiary of another parent company, and this parent can be located locally, incorporated in Singapore or overseas, so long as the parent company make comparable disclosure, we will exempt you from reporting. But on the other hand, if you are the senior most company, you do have to report, and at the same time, you need to go and consolidate your subsidiaries and investee, which means you also have to work according and take into account how your investee company, how capable they are in terms of the reporting team, and beef it up. At the same time, of course, because there are so many directors here, I will cover a bit more on the director's duties. Now, director's duty itself is not new to every one of you. We already have the existing requirements in financial reporting, and we are not going beyond that. Okay, so that means this is very similar to financial reporting itself. So it will include like statutory compliance, like keep records, circulate to shareholders, table at AGM, and etc. And then also we even allow voluntary ratification of defective report in case you get certain things wrong. Okay, and of course compliance with the standard itself. But however, you do note that whenever we impose these requirements in the Companies Act, other duties kind of kick in. And the regular duties without us amending any words will automatically apply to director's duty. And that include no false or misleading statements and all the normal duties itself. But there is something though that will be beneficial to you guys, which is the section 157 capital C, whereby, because sustainability reports sometimes include a lot of complex estimates like that, only the experts understand, right? And then for us, we just want to make sure that it's accurate and not misleading to the investors. Directors can actually rely on the third-party professional or experts' advice, provided the 3 criteria are met. Okay, so now that you sigh, you kind of have a sigh of relief, but please don't, because there's still certain duties. In particular, for B, criterion B, you are, as a director, expected to make proper inquiry where the need for inquiry is indicated by circumstances. Now, if I wear back my hat to enforce financial reporting, and if we apply the same model, standards are usually principle-based. We kind of draw the boundary for you guys to move a bit, give you a bit of room to explore and disclose, okay? But then once you cross that boundary, okay, that is when we come into the picture. And therefore, by the need of inquiry, we usually will judge whether, if you had reviewed the report itself, would you have picked up the issue like how we did as a regulator? If we do think that you ought to have be able to pick it up, then the question is, this may not apply to you. Okay? But usually, for listed companies, we don't anticipate this to be an issue because you already have gone through all the reporting and also all the review by ACRA in the case of financial reporting. But for the non-listed company, you may need to relook into your governance structure because if you're a private company, we don't really require you all to set up the committee. But if you are really required to report, it's something that you need to consider for a governance issue. Okay? Now that I finished scaring you all, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wong Yap Kim. Thank you. Next up, it's now my pleasure to invite Mr. Shai Ganu, Governing Council Member and Chair of the ESG Committee at Singapore Institute of Directors, to share on, here you can use this clicker here.
Thank you very much.
To share on how SID and the Climate Governance Initiative can support directors of listed and non-listed companies to manage the ISSB S1 and S2 reporting standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for having me, for having us. At the onset, first of all, big kudos to CDL and Hong Leong Group for doing this and for doing this for several years. You clearly are pioneers in this space. A session like this would be remiss without us thanking Esther. She's a tour de force and has built a great ecosystem around her that's not just helping CDL and Hong Leong, but also helping the broader Singapore ecosystem. So thank you, Esther. My name is Shai. As some of you know, I'm not really shy. And I'm going to take a slightly different lens. You've heard from the regulator, and I'm sorry, I'm interspersed between two regulators. Michael was going to talk here, but unfortunately, I have a flight to catch. My earlier flight, which was supposed to be later tonight, got cancelled for no reason. So I'm flying with good old SQ. So my apologies, I'm going to have to leave straight after this. But what I wanted to cover is a slightly different dimension, which is climate governance and corporate stewardship. So maybe thinking about the role of directors, the role of stewards, leaders and directors in tackling the climate issue. Before we start the presentation, maybe a quick show of hands here. Who here thinks that the role of a director is easy? Of course, that's a tongue-in-cheek question. But particularly the point I wanted to make that the world we're living in is becoming increasingly complex. You all would have heard the acronym VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, coined sometime in early 2000s to refer to sort of the post-Cold War era where the volatility and uncertainty in business markets sort of would impact how companies made decisions. There is a new term that is gaining popularity, which I particularly like, which is called BANI, B-A-N-I. And BANI stands for brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. I can't think of 4 better words to define the world that we live in today. Right? Of course, there is hope, there is optimism, there's all those good things. But yes, the world is brittle. The world is anxious. Business ecosystems are anxious. The world, some of the decisions and how things are playing out is incomprehensible. There shouldn't have been any universe in which GameStop stock rose as high as it did and people made billions of dollars out of it. But the point that I particularly wanted to make, and that's why I included the slide, is the non-linear aspect of how businesses are today. And why that's relevant for directors, for stewards. Directors, leaders, executives, we are conditioned to recognize past patterns when we make decisions in the future. But increasingly with the non-linearity of how things are panning out, we may not be able to rely on past patterns to make decisions for the future. And hence it puts that much more emphasis on exercising judgment, exercising good control. Of course, having the right data, but then sort of also putting this into the consideration set as you're making some of these decisions. So with that onset, or rather setting that context, I also wanted to just share that climate and climate governance continues to be a board-level responsibility. We've spoken about this in several different forums, SID. We've actually set up a dedicated ESG committee that I'm very fortunate to chair, and few of our committee members are actually here, and some of the speakers with you today. And the intent of that is a by-director, for-director forum on how you drive climate change and how you drive action to combat the climate crisis. But it's not all rosy. So I wanted to share with you, so WTW, my day job is with a company called Willis Towers Watson, or WTW, which is a professional services company, and I lead our executive compensation and board advisory business globally there. And we did a study with NASDAQ a few months ago, where we specifically asked, what are the skills that boards have and what are the skills boards are missing? 48%, so nearly half of the board said that they're missing climate skills on their boards. Right, so that clearly is a focus that boards are recognizing, that this issue is becoming more prominent and it would require board level attention. I mean, directorships is a profession, and in any profession, you've got to keep your pencil sharpened. So directors also need to upskill themselves about their climate-related issues. Similarly, we also looked at broader ESG oversight and whose responsibility is the broader ESG oversight. Now, different bodies are responsible for ESG in different organizations. The full board, in most cases, you have special committees, you have a dedicated ESG committee. But it was interesting that the survey with NASDAQ said that 3 in 5 organizations expect to have a standalone ESG committee in 3 years. Today, it's only around 45%, but it's expected to get close to 60% standalone ESG committee. Yap Kim shared a little bit about the global regulatory development, so I won't cover this in much more detail, except pointing out a couple of things. Especially when we look at the evolution of climate disclosures, I think there are a couple of, and for some reason, October 2023 is a very popular month. Quite a few things were announced or released this month. The one that I wanted to highlight is in California, Governor Newsom has actually signed 2 bills, Bill 253 and Bill 261, that actually it's landmark in the US context that a state would require any company who does business more than $500 million worth in California. So it doesn't have to be a California listed company. It doesn't have to be a US company. If you do business in California worth more than $500 million annual revenue, you have to start disclosing your climate sort of scope 1, scope 2, and in some cases scope 3 as well. Now, of course, anything in the US to get approvals and to pass SEC and Senate, there are few loops. But at least this was a landmark sort of thing in North America, because to date, they have been relatively quiet on the E front. North America has been more prominent on the social front, Black Lives Matters, gender representation, racial representation. That's taken a lot more attention of corporate America. But now increasingly, I think we'll start seeing attention paid to the environmental issues. Closer to home, and I don't know how many of you caught this last week. So last week, MAS actually issued guidelines for financial institutions on transition planning. These guidelines are for banks and finance companies, insurers, and asset managers. And why I highlight this is the first example globally of a detailed transition planning guidelines for financial institutions from a supervisory authority. So it has this precedent-setting potential. And the part that I really like is at the bottom, where they're saying that financial services are expected to play the role as stewards of their customers via robust engagement process and in changing business strategies and risk profiles. If any of you are interested, happy to chat further, but I also find this interesting, the right-hand side. These were some of the 5 pointers that they talked about. The first one is particularly important, that role of financial services is engagement rather than divestment. Because if you think about it, one way of managing your carbon emissions of your portfolio is divest all brown assets. But divesting the assets doesn't solve the problem, it just makes it somebody else's problem. Whereas financial services and FIs need to get part of the conversation to manage that transition. And speaking of transition, and I know Michael will cover more of this later on, but we actually, somebody should write an article. So now you've set a net zero plan, so what's next, right? So you have to focus on the transition. And the Transition Planning Task Force in the UK actually launched a framework, and this is a little bit of an eyesight test, but essentially the framework talks about ambition to action to accountability. And there is really good guidance for companies about how do you go about developing this. So with that, a little bit of a backdrop on the disclosure and the corporate governance aspects, I thought I'd spend a couple of minutes talking about corporate stewardship. So corporate stewardship, there are different lenses of stewardship, but fundamentally stewardship is the business ethos or philosophy of acting as a custodian of assets on behalf of the owners. And as a custodian of assets, your responsibility is to protect and enhance value on the long term. WTW, we've come a framework with stewardship that looks at these 5 Ps. Consulting companies like their repeatability. So the 5 Ps: purpose, people, planet, protection, and performance. So those 5 Ps, and I'll spend a little bit on each one of those because I think they're relevant. So if you think about purpose, a little bit of an interactive session, can you identify these companies based on their stated purpose? So the first one, it's a company that inspires to fulfill your curiosity. Any guesses? That's Sony, right? Number 2, to refresh the world, to inspire moments of happiness. Anybody? Coca-Cola. To make sustainable living commonplace. Unilever. We save people money so they can live better. Walmart. To organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. Google. You're right. To be recognized as an innovative creator of quality and sustainable spaces. Yeah, thank you. That was a trick question, right? A little bit of a trick question. Excellent. But you see why I'm sharing this, because starting with your purpose serves as your true north. Serves as your true north for all the decisions that you make, because then it's geared towards achieving that purpose. But there is also an element of protection. Esther talked about a lot of these natural catastrophes that are increasing in frequency and occurrence. But some of these may not impact your physical assets directly, but they may still impact your businesses, right? Because let's say you have extreme cold conditions and you're in the airline business, it may not physically impact your planes or your fleet, but you have to spend that much more time. And for somebody who was stuck on a tarmac in Chicago for 6 hours, I can tell you it is a horrible feeling. You have to spend that much more time sort of de-icing your flights or de-icing your planes before you can take off. So there is not just a physical risk aspect here, but there is also a transition risk and liability risk that companies need to consider. When we also talk about protection, or rather, people, the third bucket, anybody know who this gentleman is? This gentleman is Andrew Fastow, the former CFO of Enron. He's holding 2 things in his hand, right? The left is a trophy, the right is a card. I'll give you a little bit more perspective. The left is a trophy that he got for CFO of the Year award. The right is his prison card. And he says he got both of these for doing the exact same deals. Now, of course, I think he's being slightly provocative through that, but there is a difference through this story about it's important not just to stop what's wrong, but we also must avoid what's not right. There is certainly an important difference in that, right? And people being the biggest asset of any company, you need to drive the right behaviors. Just the next one on planet, we speak about climate governance, and especially in Singapore, sort of SID and climate governance Singapore, we've set up sort of these principles of climate governance that follow the World Economic Forum's principles. 8 principles of climate governance: accountability, subject command, board structure, materiality assessment, strategic integration, incentivization, disclosure, and exchange. So really important tools for directors and management. And then finally, focusing on performance. Some of you might have heard me say this before. Companies who do this well, this being aligning your sustainability priorities as core part of your business, let's not kid ourselves. Companies who do this well, they're not doing this solely out of the goodness of their hearts. Right? The moral imperative only lasts till a certain point. For this to be truly meaningful change, you have to realize the tangible business benefits that come from it. And there are several business benefits which I won't spend time talking about today. So the last thing is just as SID and the resources that you may have, there is a wonderful repository called Climate Governance Initiative, CGI, which was set up by the World Economic Forum. I'm very fortunate I serve on the global governing board of CGI as well. We have 30 different chapters, including a chapter in Singapore. The chapter in Singapore is actually co-founded by one of your board members, Ms. Wong Ai. So she has been very instrumental in setting that up, and now it's integrated within SID. And so the intent is this is a by-director, for-director forum to allow companies to help combat the climate crisis. All right, so with that, perhaps my apologies, I'm going to have to take your leave, but thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you, Shai, and thank you so much for making the time to come despite your busy schedule. Safe travels. Next up, I'd like to invite Mr. Michael Tang, Head of Listing Policy and Product Admission and Head of Sustainable Development Office at SGX, to share his insight on the role of SGX in both ISSB and SRAC recommendations.
Hi, afternoon everyone, and thanks for having me here again. I think there was a running, transportation analogy. I think Yap Kim was talking about the train, and Shai literally had to catch his flight. So maybe I thought I'll extend that analogy a little bit and reflect a bit about what the SRAC has done. Yap Kim has shared a bit about the proposals, but I think the really key driving philosophy for me is that we've tried to take a very balanced approach in arriving at these proposals. We want to get there fast, given the urgency of the situation, but we want to make sure that we get there safe and sound. We can't have people falling overside if we're going too fast. So I think through the different interactions that we've had even before the consultation, through closed group discussions with different stakeholder groups, I think we've hoped that we've arrived at a balanced set of recommendations that would hopefully serve the market. So with that analogy done, I thought I'll maybe today share a bit about the state of reporting in ASEAN and the region, and also talk a bit about transition planning that Shai has also alluded to earlier. So Yap Kim has talked about what the regulations are, but how are the different jurisdictions actually doing? So this is a report that was published in 2022, so it's a little dated, but it does give you an overview of how different markets in ASEAN are doing. And this is a report that shows the importance of climate change as reported by the top 50 companies in the different markets. It's a little small too, but I think on the lower left-hand side, that's the Singapore performance. I think the key message I want to make here is that if you look at the charts, actually, different markets are making headway in doing climate reporting and assessing climate risks. So you're not alone on this journey. If you've been talking to your counterparts in the region, I'm sure you would have also heard them talk about the requirements or the challenges that they have in their markets. So the first point really is that we're all in the same train, on the same train. I think the second point that was interesting to me is that it seems that in Malaysia and Thailand, that more companies report on climate change as a material factor. And I think that there might be various reasons. I mean, firstly, maybe the industries that your top companies are in might be more real economy and companies, or they may have a maybe greater appreciation of it. But I think what we want to do is to also make sure that everyone in the market and the region moves apace with these challenges. Now, the second slide is also from the same study, and it shows the number of companies that actually report the GHG emissions. So there are a few matrix, but if you just look at the blue bar, that is the number of companies that report on the total greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. And you see that the performance of Singapore companies is about 63%. It's sort of middle of the pack amongst these companies. Again, in countries like Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, it seems that most, if not almost all of their companies are reporting on GHG emissions. I think with the recent introduction of new rules by SGX on TCFD reporting, we hope that we can also move the market up in this respect. So that's in 2022. So let's take a look at Singapore and our performance in 2023. So since we have KPMG and PwC here already, I thought I may steal some slides from EY on their review of what they've done looking at the Singapore companies. So this is a snapshot of the state of reporting of Singapore companies for FY22. You see that about 65% of companies have commenced reporting on TCFD. So this is on TCFD reporting. When we rolled out the TCFD requirements, we've also introduced a roadmap. So more carbon-intensive industries do TCFD reporting first, and that's the first sector you see on the top line on the left-hand side, the FY 2023 companies. Well, a majority of these prioritized industries have already started doing it even before it's mandatory for them. Then the next sector is really materials and buildings and transportation, slightly less percentages, but again, I think we have maybe about 50% of them, and the rest of the companies about 56%. And if you look at the spread of companies that have already started TCFD reporting in terms of their market cap, you see that large and mid-cap companies do have a head start in doing climate reporting. But it's interesting to me that actually more mid-cap companies are doing TCFD reporting than large-cap companies. So that's something I think that will warrant a further look. So from our end, from SGX RegCo, we're also working with the NUS to look at the state of reporting across not just climate, but also sustainability factors for financial years 2022. And we're looking to come out with a report in November this year. So I'll be happy to share that with everyone when that comes out. Now, the next part of my presentation, I thought I wanted to talk a bit about transition planning. Honestly, I've only heard the term rather recently, and I wasn't sure what that was. So I had to do a bit of research on what is transition planning. And we did the research, and we put out a guidance in the form of a regulators column on what is it and what should companies do in order to execute and develop a credible climate transition plan. So a transition plan is nothing more than a strategy plan in terms of how the company intends to respond to climate risks and opportunities and how you intend to build long-term resilience in your business model. It is nothing more than a strategy plan, but it is also not a marketing plan. It is not a communication tool to state grandiose claims or unspecified, non-specific claims on what the company will do in the future. And I think there are three main elements that I would like to share that's important in putting together a transition plan. Firstly, is a comprehensive understanding of what the material climate-related risks and opportunities are. So what are the sources of climate risks to your business? What is the severity? And what is the likelihood of these risks materializing? Next, I think to come up with these risks, you probably would need to engage with your stakeholders across your value chain in order to understand whether or not these are indeed something that you should look at. And it's also critical that you look at it not just from the company's perspective, but from individual asset level, because the risks that will affect different assets might be different depending on the particular circumstances. Now, if you've done sustainability reporting, you realize that this is actually sustainability reporting processes. You engage with stakeholders, you identify the most material ESG risks, and then you think about what to do. So to me, climate transition plan is in fact part of the process that you would have to do if you want to put out a good sustainability report. Now next, strong governance structures. Obviously, there needs to be accountability for the plans, but also incentives to make sure that the proper behaviors are going to be in place to incentivize people to take action. Resourcing is also something very critical, that through the governance structure, you're able to allocate capital to deal with these requirements and challenges. The last one is really on monitoring your targets. These must be credible targets. I think Esther talked about how science-based targets are very important. So these targets should be based on the latest climate science. And because these are long-term plan, you would probably need to set milestones and interim targets and to track these interim targets as you meet the long-term goals. The credibility really comes in different forms. I was speaking to a researcher at the Oxford Sustainable Finance Group, and they're doing a piece of research, and actually an AI tool, which would analyze whether or not a transition plan is actually credible or not, looking at different metrics, whether or not it is feasible, is there sufficient ambition, and is it internally consistent. And through this AI tool, it will give you a grading of how robust your transition plan is. So I think when that is out, it'll be an interesting piece of tool for everyone to maybe do your own internal assessment of your robustness of targets and plan. So I think other slides Shai has talked about, so I won't go into detail, but maybe I'll end with also another transport analogy. I think if we do not put in place these transition plans and plan ahead, then it's very likely that our flights will be cancelled. We can't catch our flights, and then we have to make do and be forced to deal with the uncertainties. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next up, can I please invite Ms. Fang Yulin, Partner, Sustainability and Climate Change Practice Leader at PwC Singapore, to give us more clarity on the complex reporting standards.
Thanks. I've been given strict instructions from Esther to keep this within 5 minutes. So 7 minutes. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. Yes, so today I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the sustainability reporting standards. Just now, Mike, and others have also shared, Kim has also shared a little bit more about that, but I'm just going to deep dive into some practical issues, and I hope also to be able to connect some of the dots as well. I don't have an analogy for transportation at this point in time. I might think about it later as I close. Sorry to disappoint, but I think for the agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is a snapshot of the sustainability reporting standards, and very aligned to the Ernst & Young report that you've just flashed, Michael. And, the next thing also is to just a quick snapshot about global developments and then local developments as well, and also a spotlight on ISSB. And I like to make a few points around that, and then also some common reflections. So this is a report that PwC had produced around June time, and it looked into the sustainability reporting features across not only Singapore, but also across Asia Pacific as well. Right? Singaporeans very competitive, so we might say, okay, how did we fare? Must be first, huh? Okay, so let's see how we fare. But before we go into that, I wanted to show this heat map. It is not meant to confuse, it's meant to, enlighten, right? And the point here that I wanted to make was that, firstly, Global Reporting Initiative, which is a very ubiquitous standard, is actually 81% being adopted in Asia Pacific for the top companies, listed companies. And in Singapore, we've analyzed this, we've also worked with the NUS Business School on this. It is 98%. So keep that in mind. It is a very well-established standard. CDL uses this as well. And, not because, it's a good standard, it is a standard. And just, maybe just take a guess about when GRI was established. 1997. Yeah, 1997, when many of us were just, babies, right? So, it was in 1997. So it's not unusual why that many companies have actually used the GRI. But I also like to highlight as well the SASB. SASB, as you know, is a more financial type of standard, not super well used, in Asia Pacific. But let's come to that a little bit later. And last but not least, just to triangulate with the Ernst & Young report, I think maybe we're looking at two different population sizes, but generally the direction is there. Is that the TCFD as a framework is being used more and more, and you can see from the preceding year to this year, it's actually increased. My own observation or my hunch in that is that despite not all of the jurisdictions actually saying that you have to use GRI or mandatory for that, I think that companies just naturally think that it's a very useful framework. And you can see this in the results as well. Now, in terms of just where we are at in the net zero game, you can see here that most of the jurisdictions have already set net zero targets, or somewhat close to that. It depends also on different countries. Some say it's 2050, which is the ideal one, or some say it might be 2060, because it depends on the status of the country as well. Some of them still have existing CFPPs or coal-fired power plants, make it difficult for them to decarbonize. So most of them have net zero targets. But unfortunately, I would say that, for companies itself, the country itself will be driven by a couple of things. Firstly, the governments and also society and also businesses as well. If the country has that kind of ambition to set net zero target, what would really help in terms of the decarbonization would be that the organizations also set net zero targets as well. But there seems to be a little bit of gap between the company's ambition and also the national ambitions as well. My own personal view on this is just that it will take time. And in time to come, I think more and more companies will actually set net zero targets, and as what Michael said as well, credible net zero targets as well. I want to make a point about TPT or climate transition plans. It is becoming everywhere. Later on, when I talk about the ISSB, they also make specific mention of climate transition plans. Just now Esther also flashed out, got a lot of those kind of what do you call it, awards, and all the what do you call it? Yeah, ratings, awards and ratings that she always get A+ in. She's an A student. Inside CDP also, CDP is a very, very high standard, kind of, rating agency. They also slipped in, I want you to show me your climate transition plan. Okay? If you don't have a climate transition plan, they will deduct marks. Of course, A+ students don't want to be A. They want to continue to be A+, right? So many companies are now saying, I want to be able to be still excellent in terms of my climate ambitions. And these rating agencies are interconnected and they talk to all the standards, right? And all the major standard setters and regulations as well. They say we've included the climate transition plan as a requirement as well. So I think, just on this slide, the takeaway is that countries have ambition, but companies also will need to have ambition as well. There are good guidance around it, whether it's the UK TPT or in Singapore, the recently released climate transition plan. We should definitely look at it in the near term. Now, just now, Esther also mentioned about everything, in terms of all the sustainability-related risks, she takes note of that. But at the same time, she will also make sure that she talked to her risk folks as well, say, I must incorporate it inside my risk register, okay? And then respond to that to make sure that it is reduced to an acceptable level of risk, right? So with this, I think, in Singapore, generally, it is correct. It's triangulated as well. Climate risks are well identified. They find that there's value in terms of using the TCFD, but the next bound is actually incorporating it into your risk management. And that's something that will come in time as well. There's a little bit of gap in relation to that across Asia Pacific. Now, I'm moving on to global standards. You would not be unfamiliar with this. And just to share that the ISSB two years ago at COP26 had actually announced, right, that they will, in very accounting kind of language, said that they will consolidate, some of the other standards as well. So consolidation of the others, such as the SASB, integrated reporting, and also the CDSB. But at that point in time, they said that yes, they're interrelating very much, on the TCFD. TCFD is something that you've started since 2018. Now, the TCFD is now, very much part of the second standard of the ISSB, or IFRS S1, which leverages a lot of the concepts or the principles of the TCFD and more. We call it a TCFD plus, okay? But just a little bit of a note there. I think, now just to clarify that the ISSB has now formally taken over the monitoring of the TCFD as well, so that will take into effect next year. So kind of like bringing them closer. Then how about GRI? GRI, will work closely as well, whilst it is the dominant standard, as you can tell, but it will work closely, as we understand, with the ISSB as well, and more to come, as what Esther has alluded to later. Is it November yet? Not yet, right? Next month, right? Next month, yeah. I won't go into too much detail on this, but what I wanted to share was that, remember, there is now an announcement on the global baseline in the financial world, which is the use of the ISSB standard. Yap Kim just now had shared that, as part of the SRAC, which actually Esther is the chair of the SRAC committee, that there are a few things to note. Number one is that you start with climate first. Has CDL started with climate already? Yes, you have. You have started a long time ago. The next thing is that what standard are we going to be using as a baseline standard in Singapore for listed companies, and also for those which are about $1 billion and more? We will use the ISSB standards, okay? So I'll mirror the ISSB standards. So I want to keep those 2 points there. This testing your eyesight again. This is PwC's. If you wanted to not read the 300 pages in the ISSB, you can refer to this quick takeaways. And it's just a real summary in terms of the S1 and S2 standard, but I'll deep dive into it. The first thing is, and this one, I think accountants in the room will appreciate this, and something that you might want to take note of. Firstly, in terms of the S1 standards, and by the way, there's only two chapters that's come out with the ISSB. The first one, which is general requirements, right? It does say that it is useful for primary users of general purpose financial reports. This sounds very familiar in terms of language, right, in relation to the IFRS standards. So primary users here are existing and potential investors, lenders, and other creditors. Okay, just to look at that point. The next thing is what to disclose. And what you need to disclose is sustainability-related risk and opportunities expected to impact an entity's prospects. And what are prospects? Prospects are cash flows that access to finance or cost of capital over a short, medium, or long term. So again, familiar grounds, from a financial perspective as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about is reporting entity. Now, those who love to do consolidation and elimination, right, this is where this comes in. So the reporting entity shall be the same reporting entities as those at the financial statements as well. So again, this is something that must be checked. Are all your subsidiaries properly lined up? If you're needing to disclose the sustainability-related information that's material, is it properly lined up? Similar, to the financial reporting as well. The next thing I would say is that what Yap Kim said as well, some things are a little bit more complex, take a little bit more time, which is anticipated effects. To the extent possible, and to the extent that it is material, you have assessed it as material, the company should also try to anticipate the effects on the statement of financial position, performance, and also the cash flows as well. But I like to say that in my own personal view, given the amount of data that's available at this point in time, sometimes it's quite difficult to obtain these kind of financial effects or quantitativeness of it. In the absence of it, qualitative data is also important and also has a place under the sun in terms of climate reporting as well. They're both important as we try over time to try to get this more quantitative and better data as well. So this is my last slide and my key reflections. The first thing is that companies in Singapore, just now Michael has shared that quite a number of companies have already made a start in terms of climate-related reporting. Now, if we are going to go into the next bound, which is that, yes, let's say that we would propose to use the ISSB and climate first as a disclosures, then naturally, I think logically, you have already made a head start already. But although we do recognize that the climate standard under ISSB, IFRS S2, has a little bit more, and we can talk a little bit more about later. But nonetheless, I do think that many companies have a head start already. The next thing is that you did was it 120 sustainability reports already, Esther? Yeah, 16, sustainability reports. Many, and also based on GRI. I think, it is correct to acknowledge, all the good work that has been done before. But now, given that there is a proposal on the table, right, that you will mirror the ISSB requirements for listed companies, and those at more than $1 billion, what does this mean in terms of going forward as well? You must be able to satisfy the requirement for ISSB, but then, how do you also then make sure that alongside other standards as well that you're very familiar with for a long time? So that's a question. The next thing is that, given just now I shared a little bit more about the ISSB and also different aspects of it that is more financial in nature. Some of the terminology and nomenclature are actually very similar to the IFRS. Is there more opportunity as well to collaborate with other parts of divisions within an organization, including CDL? Is there other opportunities to also collaborate with, say, for example, the finance team? And last but not least, and actually I did have something about transportation. I wanted to say that the road is long. Yeah, I'm lacking sleep also, but the road is very, very long. And in ISSB, there's only 2 chapters that have come out, and it's not going to stop. If you take a leaf from the European standards, how many are there in the European standard? Just now got one slide there. You got count? 12 standards. Yeah, not yet finished. So got some more, okay? So it's like a little bit like an Init Blyton series. You just have more and more coming out. So the road is long, right? And I would say that in my own reflections over the past year, just looking at the various standards and how it's been developing globally, I would say that the strides that you take now will determine the rest of the distance that you have to run. So the more you do upfront right now, the less of you have to do later, because there are many, many other chapters that have not been written. So those are my reflections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yulin. Next up, can I please invite Ms. Shireen Falk, Partner ESG at KPMG Singapore, to share with us KPMG's take on the challenges and opportunities for corporate reporting processes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. All good? Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Shireen from KPMG, and you have heard from everyone around many different developments that are really quite overwhelming for all of us. So how many of these acronyms do you remember right now? GRI? Gentleman at the back, GRI. What does it stand for? TCFD? TNFD? ESRS? Nobody's raising their hand anymore. Well, that is quite okay. That is a pretty normal state. And last week, just at the ISCA session also, we had this quiz for everyone. And I would say that hopefully everyone walked away with at least 4 acronyms that they know. The GRI, the TCFD, ISSB, and one more optional that you can choose. Okay, and essentially what we are doing right now, what I hope to bring to you today as the last speaker in the session is to walk this mile with you. And as I'm doing sustainability, my background is in accounting. So like many of you, I'm quite conversant with financial numbers. But one of the taglines that kept coming out along this journey, after many years of looking at ESG, is we really need to cut through complexity. So earlier on, when we listened to Shai, and he had all the taglines over there, right? Actually, KPMG's tagline was cutting through complexity. And that kept coming by, right? Because it got so complex at some point in time, and we all have our 365 days of business that we have to run, right? So unless we are able to do that quite seamlessly and with elegance, it will be a very challenging journey. So in today's session, in just these 5 minutes, I'll run you through some of the areas where we'll bring you straight to the point, okay? So the focus of this session is around ESG in the business. All right, we have heard a lot about reporting and many different standards, and all of them are really looking at a very fundamental shift around reporting, where we are going to try to address the reporting gap. And this is a very old publication. This was a publication from 2013. All right, before, 2013 was before COVID and many of the changes that has happened. Essentially, if we think about it, amidst this very mysterious and confusing set of frameworks, what it's trying to do is actually to create reports that are more reflective of business value. All right, and if you see where we have moved quite a lot in terms of financial reporting, you realize that the financial reporting standards have also evolved such that we are now focusing less on past performance to start sharing more around plans as well as strategic issue. And reporting is, the new frameworks are really meant for us to deal with business value, talking about narrations on how we think about business as usual, in that proportion. So what you do as a regular churn day to day, this forms part of my retrospective accounting for my performance, all right? And then later on, more on your management plans as well as game changes. So what affects the terminal value of my business? And essentially, when we start adopting more of the frameworks like TCFD, ISSB, that is essentially where we are trying to move over a period of time, over that long road. Now, we don't want to report on every single thing because the laundry list is very long. Like what Esther shared, there are more than 600 different frameworks and more than 400 indicators quite easily, right? So in fact, if we look at what the investors are looking at, and we talk about business value, there is a movement now to look at how do I determine what are the metrics that matter. So if I take a step back and I say I'm not running this business and I'm looking at it from a third-party point of view, as an investor, what would I be looking for? What kind of matrix am I looking for when I look at all your reporting? And coincidentally, just last year, there was a thought leadership that we created with the Sustainable Markets Index, where we looked at what kind of matrix were important to the private equity players. And of course, your investor groups will be much more than private equity, but this is a good indicator of what they look for. First of all, private equity players, in this particular sense, the investors will have to determine what is material to them. So they have to undergo a series of materiality, identify the common themes across their portfolio, and then think about whether or not portfolio companies or maybe your investments are mature enough to report. If not mature enough, then just like what the earlier speakers before me discussed, they would have to engage with you. So it is a journey. Now, interestingly, if you look at the 10 top themes that investor groups are looking at, climate change, of course, number one. Like Yap Kim mentioned, this is our very first step. And then you have a whole host of environmental, social, and technology issues around data governance and cybersecurity and corporate governance. Okay, so these are the top 10 themes that were identified by investors all over the world, which means that we can expect questions around many of these areas that you are already dealing with. So we first start with thinking about, I'm doing reporting, but what am I reporting for? And if my reporting is really to enhance my business value, then how does a third party or an investor look at me? Okay, what do they look out for? Now, there are many different types of businesses in this group, so I've just taken the liberty to pull out some of these. Now, when we talk about ISSB adoption, you realize that they have also consolidated, as Yulin mentioned, many different references. So they have referenced SSB for sector frameworks. And interestingly, across all the different lines of business, whether it's construction, consumer finance, real estate, and hotels and lodging, that might be relevant to you in your respective businesses, you realize that there are 14 common issues that needs to be reported on across 4 industries. All right? And they are very, very closely mirroring what the investor groups are looking at in the previous slide. The ones that are in gray are those that are emerging. And earlier on, we talked about what are the new expectations of business. The ones that are in gray are the ones that are emerging and increasingly important around human rights, community relations, employee engagement, accessibility, affordability. Now, in 2 sentences, you can classify them as those that look at preserving value. That means that I'm looking at how I run my business, and those that are creating positive impact, those that are enhancing my value. So as I move forward, what am I doing around these indicators? Same here. So across your 4 industries, you see that there are certain parts, for example, for consumer finance, right? Your material factors may not include air quality, which is number 2, but they will definitely include customer privacy, data security, selling practices, because this is core to your business. If you are in hotels and lodging or real estate, then there are things like ecological impacts, right? Whereas if you're in consumer financing, maybe ecological impacts are not your immediate concern. And if we look at this, it's quite interesting. Item number 12, under the technical header of product design and lifecycle management, for construction materials, I want to talk about product innovation. So if I create new cement, or I have new technology and science that creates a greener environment at a commercially feasible cost, that is part of my reporting. But under that same number 12, if I am in real estate and I have tenants, I don't talk about product innovation. I will talk about management of tenant sustainability impacts. Right? So you will see that while there are common issues that investor groups are looking at, which are on the left, number 1 to 12, then number 1 to 14, for each one, there are different nuances that you have for different business lines. Now, while we are catching the train on reporting, and that's going very fast, I just want to point out that the valuations themselves are not quite catching up yet. You know, the valuations that you get from your valuers every year. And we say, okay, this is how we are going to report the numbers at fair value, at market value of my assets, my property, my portfolio. The valuations themselves are not quite catching up yet, but they are starting to do so. So there are 3 methods of valuation as you are comfortable with. In traditional accounting language, income approaches, discounted cash flow, and capitalization. Under valuation, market approach, direct comparison. That means I'm looking for market comparables. Now, given the complexity of climate change and the changing regulations, how many market comparables do you think we will have? Realistically, very few, right? The level of maturity is not there yet for us to have many market comparables. And in terms of discounted cash flows, I need to think about how are my cash flows affected? Don't know. Sizing? Don't know. Terminal value? I can guess, but I don't know. And all of these will eventually be created for sustainability. The pink bubbles at the bottom show you how climate change will be impacting valuations going forward through all of these different channels. Carbon emissions, net zero, energy efficiency, these are more certain areas. But how would sustainability, for example, affect planning, zoning, and development for real estate? Right? How will it affect leasing and finance? How will it affect property quality and market participants? Depending on different markets where you are in, how much does a tenant pay attention to sustainability? And increasingly, together with the valuers, this will be reflected inside your valuation reports over time. Now, where we see, realistically, if companies are not able to value this ESG in their reporting or in their asset valuation, then in the immediate term, for companies who have started the journey early like CDL, you may expect to see pricing differentiation or competitive lead between yourself and other companies. Okay? But for companies who have not started at all, this is going to be a downward push on asset values because it only unearths a host of exposures that you have that currently has not been priced in. So this is a long one. So for the next few years, I think we'll expect a lot more discussion here. And so we are working also with CBRE and some of the bigger valuers and APRIA to develop this space and start to inform it. So anything that we have around practical challenges is something that we will have to feedback. Okay, so to summarize, your information used to manage the business, you have your IFRS standards as well as GRI standards. The future state of reporting, just very simply put, is you would have a set of reporting to your investors and stakeholders that cover all these different aspects in one single source. And that is the utopia stage that we would want to aim for. Earlier on, when I talk about the reporting gap, this is where you want to be. Okay, so just very quickly, on litigations, these are all the litigations that have spiked in the last few years. Do you all know how many litigations are there around environmental rules around the world? Take a guess. Last count, 1,500 different rules. Okay? And in the last year, how many litigation cases arising from Paris Agreement in 2016? Just last year alone was 800. To date, the catalogue is 1,008. So that's half in a year. Okay, a 50% growth. So this is something that we need to watch out for because the way that litigation is happening is also becoming more sophisticated. Now, I will just have to say that recently we did a study. We found that actually most companies are not quite ready for all of these new things. So 75% of companies are not ready for ESG reporting because internally there could be scattered responsibilities around ESG reporting. And just a snapshot, over here you would see that many of the companies are starting to look at it from an investor point of view, but internal audit as well as the boards and the chief sustainability officer are starting to play a more important role, the dedicated focus that's given to ESG. There is a need for us to distill business value by looking at your decarbonization pathways. So those of you who are not accountants by training, you will have to pair up with your friends who are engineers and scientists in the organization so that end to end, you're able to speak a single language across that talks to business value. So for example, for myself, my friend here is Sunil, and Sunil is an engineer. Our other friends are scientists. I'm an accountant. Most of the time, we don't know what each other's specializations are, but we have an alignment among us to capability built together. And that will be the same change that you will see in your organizations. So Sunil did this, and it really talks about operationally, how do I go about monitoring and implementing decarbonization in real estate? Different levers that you can use, and we'll send you this because in the interest of time, I think it's difficult to go through, but we'll send you this. This is part of a playbook that we developed together with Singapore Poly to talk about how do you decarbonize real assets on the ground, okay? And making sure that we keep an eye on the P&L on the daily basis by returning to basics and making sure that all of these are reflected in my usual KPIs on occupancy, rent, lower costs, and so on. So in Australia, for example, this study has shown a significant spike measurable in terms of business value. All right, so there are many different materials that we can use, but I think as a whole, you will be inundated with so much material. I think the point is really to keep it very simple, right? For yourself, this is really about business value. How do I look at business value in the short term, value preservation, and then in the medium to longer term, creating new value and enhancing value for you. And that is an entire process that we need to take. All right, so with that, I'll leave you back to Esther. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shireen. You can take a seat on stage as we begin our panel discussion. Can I invite the rest of the panelists up on stage, please?
Yeah. While my speakers are taking their seat, we want to keep this very intense. We only have 15 minutes left, and we also want it to be very interactive. And I think we have heard a lot already, and really overload of information. So I hope I will start the question first, and please prepare your questions. And very hard to get all these busy people here today. Please help, make the best use of it. Okay, thank you so much for everything. I think sustainability reporting is about the art, the science, the finance, the engineering, the architect, the transport of things. If I want to challenge you, just give me the top 3 things that a company, that if they are new or they want to step up, can you just give 3 tips? How and what they should do? Any volunteer? Consultant first. Wang Yulin.
No, I think we should let the person who wants to keep it simple start first, the key thing.
Okay, Shireen.
Keep it simple. So the tagline is, if we can do it, so can you. Mindset change, okay? For those of you who were in the 1980s, you watched the cooking program, right? Yan can cook, so can you. Yes? That was really popular. Same mantra for ESG. If you can do it, so can you. It's really not that difficult, but it does take a good mindset, a positive mindset, a very open one, to learn from one another and kind of embark on that journey.
Hey, three things.
Maybe I
That's
can add on.
Michael, okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So maybe just stealing from what I shared earlier. I think 3 main things. Firstly, understanding the business landscape really. I mean, you said there's many things, but I think ultimately it's about business. So understanding the sustainability impacts on business that would impact on your business, whether or not there are barriers to you achieving goals, or there are things that you can leverage on. I think firstly, understanding the business environment and the sustainability implications. I think secondly, talking to your stakeholders, I think really the first step in a lot of sustainability reporting processes, right? Talking to your customers, to your regulators, to your investors about what's important to them in terms of sustainability. And then thirdly, putting in an appropriate governance structure to make sure that you achieve those goals. You've identified these as things you want to do, your corporate KPIs, and how you're going to achieve it, how is it going to cascade down. So, I mean, in essence, I think it is really like any other corporate KPI. So to treat it like a business risk or business opportunity is my, I think, advice.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's very clear. So, Yap Kim, are you ready for the 3 tips?
I don't have 3 tips, but I will share a bit about what we are hoping to actually achieve from all these requirements. While reporting is actually just an enabler, and actually we do think that meeting regulatory compliance is really something that is phase 1, but you cannot stop there, because if you stop there, you will view this as a compliance burden. We are trying in our nationwide skills plan development, which Esther co-chair. We are trying to quickly move companies from regulatory compliance to value creation, and ultimately to something more transformative that is competitive advantage. We do find that it's actually very difficult to actually do that in terms of value creation, because it's something that is unique to the companies, and it involves strategy and a lot more other consideration. And therefore, I would say that actually what we need is more people like yourself, experienced practitioner who have the experience to really navigate and build your business model to be more resilient and also future-proofing for climate itself. And therefore, because we have received a lot of requests for such courses, and it's not possible to teach, okay, we will be calling upon people like you guys, okay, we want that to come in to actually share with the profession and the in companies to actually go through the journey. I think in reality here, our companies do not have 16 years like yourself to really develop over time. You have very rich experience, you have very practical approach, and also quite future-proofing in terms of the ambition. Come forward to actually share with the other companies. That's what we will try to appeal to you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, doing national service, yes. But actually, a lot of companies will start with that, oh, just call a consultant to come in. You know, that's how we should start. Okay, Ms. Fang Yulin.
I'm
Your tip.
I'm actually a very I'm a bit more circumspect about things, right? So I do think that just now when I was coming here, there was a lady that was walking with me, and we both said, "Wow, very hot, very, very hot." It is getting hot, and I sit on the board of the National Environment Agency, and we will be coming out with a paper soon, and that's on some of the more climatic changes that are occurring in Singapore and also in the region as well. Just do look out for it. My own view is that we left it a little bit too late, unfortunately. Maybe if Chatham House rules allow, leaders lead to lead. And unfortunately, I think that we started a little bit too late. And therefore, there's a little bit of catch-up to do at this point in time. I would say this, I don't have 3 grand points, but I just have to say that we should definitely try our best, but prepare for the worst. So at this point in time, there are many talks about using blended finance to help with adaptation measures. We should be prepared for that as well. Maybe I have another point, which is about business models. Is the business model that we used to have the correct one, which is only focused on financial? Do we need to have another business model that is a little bit more encompassing, whilst noting that financials is important, but how do you make sure that you right-size the world and make it a bit more balanced and bring the transition along, so a more just transition as well? So I apologize, I don't have 3 points, I have like 2. Yeah.
Yeah, not a problem, but I think just now you showed the data that almost 90% of companies have been using GRI. So many companies here also, you're familiar with it. So how do we really just make a transition, from GRI to ISSB? And those also 60% are using TCFD. So the transition, would it be as simple as like just switch over, or are there gaps and all? And Shireen, you want to give it a shot first?
Yeah, so between the TCFD and ISSB, I think it's important to keep in mind, actually the difference stems from wanting to look at it in terms of value, right? And that value can be financial and non-financial. For TCFD, they have already taken that big step on looking at strategy as well as risk management, which is more upstream than your usual downstream reporting disclosures. But where ISSB covers more of, and I think Yulin and will also be able to share, the ISSB covers a lot more around management approaches, methodologies, actual metrics that reflect that you are actually dealing with it, so to say. So for example, some of the metrics include the percentage of CAPEX, percentage of investments that you have put into transition or greening your business, right? Or your percentage of assets and items that are at risk because you have not managed that level of exposures that your asset base or your portfolio has. So they have certain specific metrics that are given to you to say, look, if I'm managing my business well or governing it well, then this should naturally be reflected as part of my performance scorecard.
Great. Yulin, you want to add anything about the gaps? You are very familiar with TCFD. We have done climate change scenario planning and all. Under ISSB, how much TCFD's recommendation will be really transitioned to just S1, S2?
Sure, no problem. Just to take note, and then this Yap Kim will always remind me as well, S2 must use with S1 as well. S2 must use with S1, okay? Cannot just use S1 or S2 alone. It must be done, it must be used in conjunction with S1. Because why? S1 are the general requirements, and where are the reliefs, the temporary reliefs and structural reliefs, means where are the things that you can say, I'm not ready, I can't do this, it's in S1, the S1 standard, right? So you have to use both at the same time. And I would say that, I know I was a little bit pouring a little bit of I was a bit of a downer just now, but actually, it's doable, okay? If you do a gap analysis, and we've already done so, so once, I was waiting with bated breath, when the ISSB came out, when it came out, I grabbed it straight away. Our team did a detailed gap analysis. And we do know, what are the different kind of gaps which are, different from the TCFD to go into the ISSB IFRS S2 standard as well. Shireen mentioned some of those kind of differences just now. When the ISSB came down, they said that the S2 standard is a bit of a TCFD, but called TCFD plus, right? So there are some things which are a little bit more plus. So for example, we do have followed the GHG protocol at this point in time. Just one example. But right now, if you use the climate standard, you will have to disclose it quite similarly as you do with consolidated accounts, looking at the emissions from disclosing it from a subsidiary perspective, looking at it from joint ventures and associates and other investors as well. So these are some of the tweaks that you need to take in place alongside with making sure that the reporting entity as well is aligned as well to your financial reporting too. So those are, I would say that whilst on a longer term basis, I'm a little bit more circumspect, but I would have to say that in relation to sustainability reporting, as what Yap Kim had said, it is an enabler. If you just sit down and focus, it's very doable to be able to understand the gaps and what's more important. And now, usually, the transportation analogy is to build a roadmap as well in the next 2-3 years.
Yeah.
I
you want to
add? So ISSB standard actually is something that the regulators are very actively involved in. And actually, we have, through ISCO, our MAS colleagues and etc., we have been feeding back to the international standard setter to actually tell them that you need to consider what we call proportionality. Proportionality is, in a way, it takes into account a company's maturity level in reporting. It also allows simplification for companies that just newly started. So it will provide like certain disclosure, you disclose 1 year later, giving you more time. Then there are some that say, can you use estimate? Like for example, scope 3, it's not possible for us to go and gather the data throughout the whole value chain, especially if it involves non-listed company or SME. They recognize that there is a time required to create the platform and then information sharing, etc. So they actually allow the use of estimates, and they also allow like climate scenario or the qualitative kind of disclosure. So the question is, I think one of the vice chair actually visited Singapore, and he emphasized that while it's good to aim for perfection, you're not expected to achieve perfection from day one. Start first, that's most important, and then later improve over time. And naturally, you will improve, and one day we will hopefully have a lot of like CDL standard. Yeah.
Thank you so much, but it's still a really long journey. I think regulators can really drive change overnight. So for SGX, how forgiving are you going to be? If some company take a little bit longer time for transition, I mean, especially SME, we need the supply chain to come on board. Not every listed companies are big and resourceful, and some of them may not even have a sustainability team. So how would SGX advise those? And if they really miss the bar a little bit, what will be the likely penalty? Huh?
Wow. Maybe I'll start by going back to what I said about there being a balanced approach to these things. And it's not a new question, really. I mean, when we introduced sustainability reporting for the first time, many companies that have not done it have also asked the same questions. And I think my response then is, look, really our focus is on adoption, not on enforcement. If we do find that there's something missing from the report, then our first instinct is really to ask you why, what has happened, right? Is it a case where you have not put in place the process to get the information? Is it a case where you've deliberately not put in the information? I think all these are questions that we'll ask. And then that would also determine then what our response would be. Is it to help you along by giving you more guidance, leeway, time to get on board, to get the information? Or is it when someone is deliberately not giving information, not following the rules with no good reason, then what should be the appropriate response to that? I think a lot of our companies are actually very interested in ensuring that they meet the requirements, but we understand that they need time, they need more resource, they need more guidance. And as what Yap Kim has said, these are, I think, some of the proportionality mechanisms that's already inbuilt in some of these standards like the ISSB. If you need information that you cannot get without undue cost or effort, then maybe this is not information you need to put into the report right now. If you can't get qualitative information but only quantitative, then maybe you need to tell your investors that I can't really get the quantitative information because there's too much estimation error, and therefore it's not going to be useful for you if I put it into the report right now. So I think these are some of the inbuilt mechanisms in the standards that allow for proportionality. From our part, we've also rolled out the requirements sequentially. We started with TCFD because we knew that climate is going to be important, that even though ISSB is going to come on board later, like now, it was important to get companies up to speed in 2021. So we did push ahead to put that into place, but on a comply explain basis, so giving companies leeway to select the most important elements to disclose first, and then also then pushing out the mandatory aspect in a phased approach through more prioritized industries where we think they may be more affected by these requirements, to now actually having put out an ISSB standard. So you can be assured that actually we're going to take the same approach, right? This roadmap is really with a view to getting everyone to the same endpoint. If you are a bit slower for resource reasons, for familiarity, knowledge reasons, I think we would try to help you along. But I think the point remains that everyone needs to get started. Everyone needs to get onto this same journey. So if you're not starting, then I think that's when we would be a lot more strict in coming down.
I think if I can add on, I think regulator is the last not as critical in terms of, although we have certain expectation, I think that generally we are more open to explanation and etc. once we can identify that there's a goodwill to do it. But actually what you should be more concerned about is the institutional investors. I think climate and also the lenders' action as well. In an OECD report that talks about principle of corporate governance, they have identified that shareholders will like to be engaged. And then when they are a bit more worried, they will start to give action, like vote against certain resolution, vote against certain board appointment, for example. And then some, they kind of like lost patience in that sense, if I can use the word. And they think that whatever action that's taken by the company is not aligned with Paris Agreement, they will take shareholder litigation. There has been a rise in the shareholder litigation. We have analyzed what's the impact to Singapore. In fact, there have been a research done by the NTU, I think, on class action suit and etc. And then the conclusion is that engagement is better than shareholder litigation. But institutional investors are very passionate about this topic. Our banks have also set very ambitious targets. There will be growing pressure. And therefore, it's better to kind of do it before the pressure is mounted on you, in which case you lost the choice to control your pace in that sense.
Thank you. And we have time for 2 questions only. Who are the lucky one? 1 question? Anyone? Yes, do? Very good.
Hi, thank you so much for the informative panel. Really learned a lot. And actually, I had a question for each one of you. Yapkin, you already addressed it with your proportionality explanation just now. So Michael, to the minority in the panel, it was exciting to read about green ammonia being traded in SGX. Could you share a bit about carbon offsetting, going forward, what are some thoughts about that? Will we be looking more at carbon removal, for example? And then for you, Lynn, maybe you might have some insider intel into why double materiality was actually dropped out from ISSB discussions, because initially it was going to be included, right, if I'm not wrong. And then in the end, it was not really worded into the requirement. Okay.
It's okay. I can give my hunch on it, but just my personal hunch. Yeah.
That's great. And Shireen, it was really nice hearing from you about valuation and all that. So, and also pricing in exposures. So, what strategy can we take when we think about sustainable acquisitions? Because we also have to green our portfolio. So, if you have any thoughts.
Okay, thanks, Dale. Very good. You take up all the time that we have. Okay, so we allow these 3, to answer the questions. And Michael,
maybe I'll start first, and maybe I'll just very briefly. As a platform for trading, we do roll out products that would help investors, help companies manage their own risk. So I think green ammonia is something that we've done. We've also set up a JV to trade carbon credits, and that's the Climate Impact X, CIX, which will roll out these trading opportunities for companies. But I think from the point of view of, disclosures and about carbon credits and offsets, I think you'll see that the standards will require more disclosures on what's your planned use of these credits. In the transition plan disclosures, I think they also ask about the quality of the credits, where you obtain them, provenance, and as well as what your use of it is. I think the general take on this issue, I think, is if you can reduce, of course, that's the first, but it's only when you can't, and I think some of these other options might be available to you to meet those requirements.
Yeah, Yolene, double materiality.
Well, I think there was some mention in terms of double materiality, but my own personal observations of it is that whenever you say, let's say you say, does GRI plus ISSB equal ESRS, right? You'll never get a very clear answer on that. So I think if you analyze, the definition of double materiality, inside out, outside in, from the ESRS perspective, and you also, drill down into, the definition of what is the material sustainability-related risk and opportunities along your value chain over a short, medium, and long term, they can mean slightly different things. But I think so I don't think we should, say simply put that this plus that equals that. So that it needs a bit more nuance. And the second thing also is that the ISSB is, more for financial So I think that's and they I think quite clear that they are more about financial and the global baseline for financial markets. So I think that's their raison d'être, and we just need to continue to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may just add, actually, we don't need to be too technical about terms, about double materiality, dynamic materiality, and all that. And just now I have a slide to show financial materiality and impact materiality. I mean, everyone would know that your business will impact the external environment. The external environment will also, impact your business. So these are the so-called inside out, outside in. These are very theory by the academic, but as businesses, I think safe to say that we need to look at impact and also financial, which is also creating value. And apart from S1, S2, S3, and S4 are coming on board, and those will cover more the social aspect, which is, I think, human right is on the table. And then the next one is actually likely will be natural, nature and biodiversity. So there will be more S, coming up. So let's not be too sticky about double materiality, or it's just a term, but basically, company have to look at both impact and value. Yeah, you want to add anything? Good, right? Okay, Shireen, you have one question from Deal just now.
The question was on valuations, right?
Yeah. And sustainable acquisitions, when you're going into investment strategy, like since you can't evaluate properties with their ESG performance, then how do you go about it?
Yeah, I think we have to look at it quite simply. Even for the question of materiality, as we are explaining, what value are we looking at? So ISSB really is for capital markets. They are just interested in what your investors are looking for. Your investors have a certain set of things that they think are material. I think we shared that earlier. So those are the areas that you kind of report on to get that value. Now, when a company starts looking at ESG from a value lens, they think about, am I preserving the current value? Am I managing my exposures in the short term? And then in the longer term, am I growing that business value? And between short, medium, and long term, there could be many differences in terms of the landscape we are operating in. So in the near term, and this is a real case in Singapore for one of my clients, we started doing a TCFD assessment for them, and then we had all these very sophisticated tools around climate risk, resilience. These are your exposures, which geography, which asset type, what is the pricing, and so on. Did you have elevated items for sea levels, so on and so forth. After we did all that, we found that there were a couple of buildings in their portfolio, not in Singapore, that were highly exposed to climate change. Then the next question, of course, is, so what do I do now? So I know, right, like as management and the board, I know that I have certain exposures to climate change. Without this information going public, I now have a decision that I want to make around safeguarding my business value. So when it comes to actually their M&A strategy or their AEI strategy, with the knowledge in mind that, yes, these are certain exposures that in the medium or longer term could affect my pricing, I may change the way that I manage my M&A strategy. I may choose to focus on different asset types. I may choose to price things differently because I have to factor in that portion of greening that is either already on my books or will be in my buyer's books, right? So the question is not about, I think, compliance. Us doing all of these actions is what do we do with this afterwards? How does it change my business decisions or my strategy?
May I just embellish that a little bit, right? Is that Shireen is right to say that I think it is very useful to identify the risks. But in my own, I guess, experience of it, is actually rather unfortunate, right? That even though we identify the risks, in some cases, the risks come earlier than expected. So you can, to your best extent, right, rely on climate science, the IPCC, different kind of scenarios that you input. But I reflected about this and I said, what does this mean then? I do think that this means that we should have some kind of posture to have some kind of prudence in terms of our views on climate change as well. So until such time that it's great accuracy, I think it is good to be a little bit more prudent. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the conclusion is actually the other tagline I like most actually is just do it. If you don't do it, the cost of inaction is going to outweigh, the cost that you invest to prevent risk, to mitigate risk. And I think there will be also opportunity, risk adaptation, and in some of our experience, and Alan can share more, that we do have, find some solutions, some new innovations that can help us to improve efficiency. And I think let's not let perfection be a barrier of progress. I think we have to do it and we have to start, and don't take it as like I must be a student in the beginning. So there are a lot of help around, so you're most welcome to contact any one of us here. Thank you so much. And with this, I would like to thank my panelists, and I would like to call on our CEO to give a closing remarks. And after that, we are going to have a little tour of the exhibition. Thank you.
I was half hoping that with the time overrun, I wouldn't have to come up and give this speech. Yeah, I actually spent part of this morning doing up a speech, 4 pages in fact, and then I realized now, firstly, going after all these very accomplished speakers is going to be very challenging. By the way, could you take this picture off, please? It makes me feel very uncomfortable to keep looking at myself. Yeah, I think it's better. Let's, zero in on positive impact. Secondly, as I said, I think many of the things that I wanted to mention were covered by Esther, as well as all of our very distinguished speakers today. So thank you, Yap Kin, Michael, Yulin, Shireen, and of course, Shai, who has proven once again he's anything but shy. He always uses that phrase when he starts his presentation. Actually, if you all found it was a bit strange at the beginning, we were doing all these, picture taking and token of appreciation giving. It's because Shai had to rush off to the airport. I think several of them, when they came up, told me, hey, it feels like a graduation. So I was handing over this envelope to them. But anyway, to everyone here today, I'll keep this short, and I'll probably end up not even reading most of this script that I wrote, because I think it's better just to share, straight from the heart. Thank you everyone for joining us. As you've heard, right? I mean, we've been holding this annual forum for all of the companies within the Hong Leong Group, inclusive of CDL, since 2014. So this marks the 10th forum that we've held. And, really great to see how far sustainability has come from a good to have, kind of business practice. And now I think everyone's starting to realize, this is mainstream, this is urgent, this is an emergency. So people are having to sit up and pay attention, and having to see how they can integrate this into their business. I don't want to dwell on the negative as well. Those who have met me in private, or last year I even had to do an interview because we were going for that S&P rating, and they said very, very negative. But it's kind of like what Yulin mentioned earlier. I do think, unfortunately, the world took too long to come around to how important sustainability is, how bad the climate risks are becoming. And how complacent I think the overall landscape has been, business and political landscape has been, with all the ESG factors. And now, even as we try to accelerate things, I'm not sure we're making enough progress. I mean, people still talk about trying to cap temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by 2030. I do not think we will make it by then, because again, we just started too late. But that isn't, a cause to give up and say, okay, let's forget about it. Because if we do that, then this world is just going to deteriorate, right? And we'll just have to accept the consequences, which is we're leaving behind an uninhabitable planet for future generations. So I think we have to be responsible, socially responsible in the decisions we make and in how we run our companies. There isn't, yeah, I mean, today a lot's been said about CDL and how, we've been a leader, we've been doing sustainability reporting since 1995, led by our late Deputy Chairman, Mr. Kwek Ling Ju, and together with Esther, so blazed this trail for almost 30 years. But really, it's not about us. I mean, it's about the whole environment coming along, and working together, right? Because you can't make any meaningful change without collective partnership and collaboration. So, I know, all the various group companies are at various stages of their journey, but and I've said this before at previous forums, but there's never really a good time to start, and there's never really a good time to so-called raise the benchmark, right? I think earlier it was mentioned by one of you, was it Shireen or someone, which is that or maybe it was Yulin, sorry, her last slide, right? Which is the more you do now, I mean, the less pain you have. Was it you, Yulin? I think it was the transportation-related fourth point of your reflection. And it's true, I mean, there really isn't a good time to start, right? I mean, the more you do now, the more pain you save yourself down the road. And that actually goes on to Yap Kin's point as well, right? Which is, at some stage, you will start to realize that it is not about regulatory compliance, right? I mean, while our regulators will definitely try to be understanding and realize that everyone's at different stages of the journey, but you'll realize at some stage that if we're all doing this just for regulatory compliance, so we meet, all of the reporting requirements, and so we score good marks. I mean, for our reports. I mean, that defeats the whole purpose, right? I mean, we're doing this because at the end of the day, right, this is what our planet depends on, and these risks, as has been highlighted by all these speakers, right, directly impact our business as well. I mean, if the climate gets worse, right, I mean, in the real estate sector for sure, we're going to be impacted very, very massively. And our costs will all go up, be it insurance, other costs. There'll be some assets that we probably can't even insure because they're in places where they may be submerged by water years from now. So, the cost of inaction is very serious, and therefore I think we need to see. So again, back to Yap Kin's point, you need to go from being so-called regulatory compliance towards being value creation. How do I take all these risks that I'm facing, and how do I then apply it to my company so that I actually not only help to mitigate the risk, but end up actually taking a leap forward, potentially getting ahead of the competition because I figured out new ways, whether through innovation or whether just through doing mitigatory moves. But I found new ways to do things that are faster, better, more efficient, and that protect me from all these climate risk and other ESG-related risks that are lurking just around the corner, right? So I think that's one key thing. And I suppose also to touch on reporting, since much of today was about all these standards that are coming up that we impose on us, right? I mean, you've already heard, I mean, S1, S2 is just the beginning, right? S3, S4 is just around the corner. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if you, I think the practice of reporting, again, while it starts off being regulatory compliance, but actually it ends up really helping you a lot because, I think we've always heard this comment, right? What gets measured gets managed. As you, if you take your reporting seriously, and I think, these days, not only regulators, but our shareholders, investors, I mean, I think people value transparent disclosure, transparent and prompt disclosure and accurate disclosure. I mean, as you report these things, you actually start to realize, it's almost like a gap analysis for yourself, right? You realize where you are along your journey, where there are gaps, what you need to do to catch up. And also it helps then on your business and strategy side, okay, to strategize and think, okay, here's what I need to do in order for my business to not only catch up, but vault ahead of the competition. So, and of course, the bonus points from doing good disclosure and reporting is that, you can also attract sustainable finance. And then now there's like a wave of ESG funds, I think last count 500 billion US or something. I mean, basically a lot of funds, and this was mentioned earlier by was it Yapkin? I think you mentioned it, or was it Shireen? But you mentioned that basically, nowadays a lot of investors are looking and are scrutinizing seriously. And, I think BlackRock themselves, right, made an announcement saying that we're not going to invest in companies that don't take sustainability seriously. And of course, this is just going to get worse, right? I mean, they're going to start raising the bar. So if you want to be able to attract these funds and and if suddenly a lot of funds can't invest in your company, I mean, that's going to, your company shares and your market cap and everything else is going to take a big pounding. So I think, being able to attract sustainable finance and these ESG climate funds and stuff is also another bonus point. So I think reporting and disclosure is highly important. So I think that itself is a very good reason to get on the bandwagon and expedite the journey, because we're really out of time. Everyone's trying to get to full net zero by 2050. Let's hope we get there, okay? Because there's a long road more, and in fact, we have regressed backwards in some ways. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, has already said, right? I mean, I think the world's not doing enough, and we are over the period of the era of global warming. Now we're entering global boiling. Okay, so things are really bad. And again, not to end on a note of pessimism, because I'm not saying that there's no hope, but I'm just saying that it's urgent, it's critical, and if we want to be able to save this planet, as well as enhance our businesses and shield our businesses from the risk along the way, we do have to accelerate our efforts, and we have to work together, right? I mean, it's a collective thing. If all the governments around the world, the companies, the corporates and everything can't work together, I mean, you're not going to move the needle by a lot. So collective partnership is very, very important. So on this note, I'm glad I didn't have to use these 4 pages, although now I regret the time I spent this morning preparing. But thank you again to everyone here. Thank you to our 5 speakers, one of whom is not present. Thank you to our 5 really distinguished speakers for sharing with us again and making this very enlightening. Thanks for the questions, which were also good. Appreciate everyone's attendance, and again, feel free to reach out at any point in time, whether to us, to Esther specifically, or even to any of the speakers. If any of you need help, whether you're from Hong Leong Finance or CDL Hospitality Trust, or Hong Leong Asia, I mean, I think we're all in this together, right? And it's not just the Hong Leong Group, it's the whole world is in this together. Singapore has already made a commitment with the SG Green Plan, let's join hands and move forward together. So thank you again, everyone, for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Kwek. Now our ushers will bring you towards the CDL Green Gallery to see our Melting Ice Sinking Cities exhibition. We've also prepared some refreshments for you at Ridley Hall, so our ushers will also show you the way there. Yeah, thank you so much.